The blistering sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Unionville, Nevada, as Hope Morrison watched the last stagecoach of the day disappear into the distance, taking with it her former fiancé and every last penny she possessed. Her throat tightened as the reality of her situation sank in, abandoned at Donaldson's trading post with nothing but the clothes on her back and an empty carpet bag, hundreds of miles from her family in Boston with no means to return. "Edward, how could you?" she whispered, her voice catching on the desert air. The memory of his last words stung worse than the Nevada heat. "You're not the woman I thought you were. Find your own way home." After 3 weeks of travel, Hope had finally discovered Edward Whitney's true character. The wealthy businessman who had courted her in Boston had revealed himself to be cruel and controlling once they'd left civilization behind. When she'd refused his advances at their last camp, insisting they wait until after their planned wedding in Sacramento, he'd erupted in rage. Now here she stood, 22 years old, utterly alone in a town she'd never heard of until the stagecoach had stopped to change horses. The trading post behind her bustled with activity as miners, settlers, and cowboys went about their business, none giving her more than a passing glance. Hope squared her shoulders and blinked back tears. She would not cry. Not here, not now. With as much dignity as she could muster, she approached the weathered counter of the trading post where a balding man with spectacles tallied figures in a ledger. "Excuse me, sir," she said, proud that her voice remained steady. "Could you direct me to the nearest hotel or boarding house? I find myself unexpectedly delayed in your town." The shopkeeper looked up, his gaze traveling from her dusty but fine traveling dress to her empty hands. "Got money for a room, miss. Mrs. Fletcher's boarding house charges $1 a night in advance." Hope's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Aye, that is to say," she struggled to find words that wouldn't reveal the full extent of her humiliation. "She doesn't need any." The deep voice came from behind her, causing Hope to spin around. A tall man stood in the doorway, backlit by the setting sun. He stepped forward, revealing sun-bronzed features beneath a worn Stetson. His eyes, a startling blue against his tanned skin, assessed her with quiet intensity. "Beg pardon," Hope managed, drawing herself up despite her embarrassment. The cowboy moved closer, his spurs jingling softly against the plank floor. "Money, you don't need any." He tipped his hat slightly. "Knox Quinn at your service, madam, and if I'm not mistaken, you're in a spot of trouble." Hope bristled at his presumption, despite its accuracy. "Sir, I do not know you, and I certainly cannot accept Mrs. Fletcher is my aunt," he interrupted smoothly. "And she'd be mighty upset with me if I let a lady in distress spend the night on the street when there's a perfectly good room available." The shopkeeper chuckled. "You'd best listen to him, miss. Knox here is the most stubborn man in Unionville when he sets his mind to something." Hope studied the cowboy warily. In Boston, such an offer would come with expectations no respectable woman could accept. Yet there was something in this man's direct gaze that held no guile, only a straightforward decency that seemed as much a part of him as his weathered hat and worn leather vest. "I cannot repay you," she said finally, hating the admission. Knox Quinn's mouth curved in a slight smile. "Wasn't asking for payment." He stepped back, gesturing toward the door. "Got my horse outside. I can take you to Aunt Martha's place before dark sets in." Hope hesitated only a moment longer before nodding. What choice did she have? "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I accept your kindness, though I insist on finding a way to repay the debt." As they stepped outside into the golden light of sunset, Hope sensed she had just made a decision that would alter the course of her life forever. What she couldn't possibly know was just how right she was. Knox Quinn had never considered himself a hero. In his 30 years, he'd done his share of both good and bad, balancing the scales as best he could. But something about the proud set of the Eastern woman's shoulders as she'd stood in Donaldson's trading post, clearly abandoned but refusing to break, had stirred something protective in him. "That's Merlin," he said, nodding toward the large black gelding hitched outside. "He's gentle enough despite his size." Hope approached the horse cautiously. "He's magnificent." Knox felt an unexpected surge of pride at her appreciation. "Been with me through 8 seasons of cattle drives." He secured her carpet bag suspiciously light to his saddle before offering his hand. "If you'll allow me," after a moment's hesitation, Hope placed her gloved hand in his. With a smooth motion that spoke of years in the saddle, Knox lifted her onto Merlin before swinging up behind her. He was acutely aware of her stiffening at their proximity. "My apologies for the arrangements, miss." "Morrison," she supplied. "Hope Morrison, Miss Morrison, it's only a short ride to Aunt Martha's." As they rode down the main street, Knox kept a respectful distance, though the nature of horseback made some contact inevitable. He noticed townsfolk watching with undisguised curiosity. Knox Quinn, confirmed bachelor and foreman of the Quarter Circle K Ranch, riding double with a city woman in a fine dress. Tomorrow's gossip was already taking shape. "You're not from around these parts," he observed, guiding Merlin past the saloon where several cowboys from neighboring ranches had already begun their evening revelry. "Is it that obvious?" A hint of wry humor colored her voice. "Just a bit." Knox smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Boston, if I had to guess." She half-turned in surprise. "How did you know your accent? Had a trail boss once from Massachusetts. You share some of the same turns of phrase." Hope fell silent for a moment before asking, "Is Unionville always this lively?" Knox followed her gaze to where two miners were engaged in a heated argument outside the Silver Spur Saloon. "This is nothing. Wait until Saturday night when the boys from the Comstock mines come down." They passed the church, schoolhouse, and sheriff's office before turning onto a quiet side street lined with cottonwood trees. At the end stood a two-story white house with green shutters and a wide front porch. "That's Aunt Martha's place," Knox said. "Best cooking in Nevada territory and clean rooms. She's particular about who she lets stay, which keeps the riffraff away." As they dismounted, the front door opened to reveal a plump woman in her 50s, her graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. Sharp eyes took in the scene before her. "Knox Quinn, what trouble have you brought to my doorstep this time?" Despite her words, affection warmed her tone. "Aunt Martha, this is Miss Hope Morrison. She needs a room for a spell." Knox kept his explanation simple. "Miss Morrison, this is my Aunt Martha Fletcher." Hope extended her hand. "I apologize for arriving unannounced, Mrs. Fletcher. Mr. Quinn assured me you might have room available." Martha's keen eyes assessed Hope, taking in the quality of her travel-worn dress and the dignified way she carried herself despite obvious distress. "Any friend of Knox's is welcome here." She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in, child. You look like you could use a hot meal and a proper rest." Hope's relief was palpable. "Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher. I'm afraid I cannot pay immediately, but I assure you," Martha waved away her concerns. "Knox can settle that. Now come along before this desert night turns cold." As Hope followed Martha inside, she glanced back at Knox. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I won't forget your kindness." Knox simply nodded, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. "I'll check on you tomorrow, Miss Morrison. Perhaps we can discuss your situation then." As the door closed behind them, Knox stood for a moment in the gathering dusk. He'd done what any decent man would do, he told himself. Yet the image of Hope Morrison's green eyes, filled with a mixture of gratitude and determination, lingered in his mind as he mounted Merlin and turned toward home. Inside, Martha Fletcher led Hope to a small but immaculately clean bedroom on the second floor. Bathrooms down the hall. "Dinner's in half an hour." Martha paused at the door. "Whatever trouble you're in, miss, you're safe here." When Martha left, Hope sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd held back all day to fall. Tomorrow she would figure out what to do next. Tonight, she would simply be grateful for the unexpected kindness of strangers in this wild territory so far from home. The next morning, Hope woke to sunshine streaming through lace curtains and the smell of coffee and bacon drifting up from below. For a moment, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings, she couldn't remember where she was. Then the events of the previous day came flooding back: Edward's betrayal, being stranded, and the unexpected rescue by Knox Quinn. She dressed quickly in her one remaining outfit, a navy traveling dress that showed the wrinkles of being packed in her carpet bag. After washing her face and pinning her chestnut hair into a simple bun, Hope made her way downstairs. The boarding house kitchen was warm and inviting. Martha stood at the stove, flipping pancakes with practiced ease, while two men miners by the look of their rough clothes sat at the large table devouring their breakfasts. "There she is," Martha said cheerfully. "Thought you might sleep the morning away. Come sit. Coffee's hot and these flapjacks won't eat themselves." Hope slid onto the bench, nodding politely to the miners who tipped their hats before returning to their food. "Mrs. Fletcher, I want to thank you again for your hospitality," Hope began, accepting a steaming cup of coffee. "But I must find employment immediately. I can't impose nonsense," Martha interrupted, placing a plate heaped with pancakes, bacon, and eggs before her. Knox explained enough. "That fiancé of yours deserves a horsewhipping, leaving a young woman stranded without means." Hope's cheeks flushed. "He told you," Martha's expression softened. "Only what was necessary. Knox isn't one for gossip." She sat down across from Hope. "Now then, what skills do you have, girl?" Hope considered as she sampled the breakfast, delicious and heartier than anything she was accustomed to in Boston. "I was educated at Miss Pinkerton's Academy for Young Ladies. I can read, write, cipher, speak passable French, play piano, and I'm quite good with needlework." The miners exchanged amused glances, which Martha silenced with a sharp look. "Unionville's a mining town, dear. Not much call for French or piano playing, but there might be something." A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Martha rose to answer it, and moments later Knox Quinn entered the kitchen, removing his hat as he stepped inside. Hope couldn't help noticing how different he looked in the clear light of morning, taller somehow, his features more defined. His dark hair was slightly damp, as though recently washed, and his blue eyes found hers immediately. "Miss Morrison, trust you slept well." Hope nodded, suddenly conscious of her wrinkled dress and simple appearance. "Very well, thank you, Mr. Quinn." Knox accepted a cup of coffee from Martha before taking a seat at the table. "Been thinking about your situation. Talked to Doc Wilson last night. Seems his nurse left last month to get married, and he's been looking for someone with a steady hand and quick mind to help out." Hope blinked in surprise. "Me, work for a doctor, but I have no medical training. Doc says he can teach what you need to know. Pays $3 a week plus a room above his office if you want it." Knox sipped his coffee. "It's honest work and Doc's respected in these parts." Hope's mind raced. She had never considered such employment. In Boston, her future had been mapped out: marriage, children, maintaining a household. But Boston was thousands of miles away, and this was not the life she had planned. I would need to meet this doctor first," she said carefully. Knox nodded. "Already arranged. He's expecting us at 10 if you're agreeable. You've thought of everything, haven't you, Mr. Quinn?" Hope couldn't keep a hint of suspicion from her voice. In her experience, men didn't exert themselves this way without expecting something in return. If Knox noticed her tone, he didn't show it. "Just trying to help, Miss Morrison. Unionville's a good town, but it can be hard on those without friends or family." Martha set a plate before Knox. "The girl's right to be cautious, nephew. Not every man who offers help has honorable intentions." Knox met Hope's gaze directly. "I give you my word, Miss Morrison. My only intention is to see you safely established. After that, what you do is your business entirely." There was something in his straightforward manner that Hope found herself trusting, despite her recent experience with Edward's deception. "Then I accept your escort to meet Dr. Wilson." An hour later, Hope found herself in a small but orderly doctor's office on Unionville's Main Street. Dr. Wilson proved to be a kindly gentleman in his 60s with spectacles and a reassuring manner that immediately put her at ease. "Miss Morrison, Knox tells me you're educated and looking for a position," the doctor said after introductions were complete. "I need someone to help keep my records, prepare my instruments, and assist with patients. Nothing improper, I assure you. My wife often helped before her passing, and I've had female nurses since." Hope glanced around the office, noting the neat shelves of medicines, the examination table, and the small desk covered with patient ledgers. "I'm a quick learner, doctor, but I must be honest, I've never done anything like this before." Dr. Wilson smiled. "Few have before they start. The question is, are you willing to try? The work isn't always pleasant, but it's important," Hope considered carefully. She had limited options, and this opportunity would provide both employment and lodging. More importantly, it would give her independence while she determined her next steps. "Yes," she said finally, "I'm willing." "Excellent." Dr. Wilson clasped his hands. "When can you start?" "Immediately, if you wish." Knox, who had remained silent during their discussion, now stepped forward. "I'll fetch your things from Aunt Martha's." Dr. Wilson showed Hope to the small apartment above his office, just 2 rooms, but clean and private with a separate entrance from the back stairs. As Hope surveyed what would be her new home, she felt a curious mixture of terror and exhilaration. Nothing in her Boston upbringing had prepared her for this turn of events, yet there was something freeing about the necessity of making her own way. Knox returned with her carpet bag, setting it carefully on the small bed. "Will this suit you?" he asked, his expression unreadable. "It will," Hope said with more confidence than she felt. "Thank you, Mr. Quinn. I seem to be accumulating debts to you at an alarming rate." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "No debts between us, Miss Morrison, just neighbors helping neighbors." "Is that what we are? Neighbors?" The question slipped out before she could consider its propriety. Knox's blue eyes held hers for a moment longer than was strictly proper. "For now," he said finally, placing his hat back on his head. "I ride for the quarter Circle K about 5 miles outside town. If you need anything, word reaches the ranch quick enough." As he turned to leave, Hope called after him, "Mr. Quinn." When he looked back, she continued, "I don't understand why you've gone to such trouble for a complete stranger." Knox considered her question seriously. "My father taught me that a man's character is judged by what he does when no one's watching, and how he treats those who can offer him nothing in return." He tipped his hat. "Good day, Miss Morrison. I hope Unionville treats you well." After he left, Hope sat on the edge of her new bed, overwhelmed by how dramatically her life had changed in just 24 hours. She had arrived in Nevada territory as Edward Whitney's fiancé, expecting to continue on to Sacramento and a life of comfort and security. Now she was alone, employed as a doctor's assistant in a mining town she'd never heard of before yesterday. Yet, as she unpacked her meager belongings, Hope felt something she hadn't expected: a sense of possibility. For the first time in her life, her path was not being dictated by others. Whatever happened next would be of her own making. Hope's first weeks in Unionville passed in a blur of new experiences and challenges. Dr. Wilson proved to be a patient teacher, and she found herself absorbing knowledge about medicines, bandaging techniques, and common ailments with surprising eagerness. The work was indeed sometimes unpleasant. Mining accidents could result in gruesome injuries, but Hope discovered an inner strength she hadn't known she possessed. The townspeople initially regarded her with curiosity and some suspicion. An educated Eastern woman working as a doctor's assistant raised eyebrows, and there were whispers about her sudden appearance and her connection to Knox Quinn. But as the days passed and Hope proved herself both competent and discreet, the community began to accept her presence. She established a routine, rising early to prepare the office before patients arrived, assisting Dr. Wilson throughout the day, and spending her evenings reading medical texts he lent her or writing letters to her parents in Boston letters she had yet to mail, unsure how to explain her changed circumstances without causing them undue worry. Knox Quinn remained an enigma. After settling her with Dr. Wilson, he had returned to the quarter Circle K ranch and his duties as foreman. Occasionally, Hope would glimpse him in town on ranch business, and he would tip his hat politely if their paths crossed, but he made no special effort to seek her out. Hope told herself this was for the best. She needed to establish her independence, not form new attachments to a man she barely knew. Yet she found herself watching for him nonetheless. One Saturday afternoon, nearly a month after her arrival in Unionville, Hope was organizing supplies in the doctor's office when the door burst open. 2 miners carried in a third man, blood soaking through a makeshift bandage on his leg. "Dynamite accident up at the Northern Star," one explained breathlessly. "Caught Jake here with rock shrapnel. Doc around?" Hope moved quickly, directing them to place the injured miner on the examination table. Dr. Wilson was called to a birth at the Jenkins farm. He won't be back for hours. She assessed the wound with the calm efficiency she had developed over recent weeks. But I can help. The miners exchanged uncertain glances. No offense, miss, but Jake's hurt bad. And he'll bleed to death while you look for alternatives, Hope said firmly, already gathering instruments and disinfectant. I've assisted Dr. Wilson with similar injuries. Now, will you help me save your friend's leg, or shall we continue debating while he suffers? Her directness convinced them. For the next hour, Hope worked methodically, cleaning the wound, removing rock fragments, and finally stitching the deepest gashes with neat, precise sutures. She administered laudanum for pain and applied antiseptic salve and clean bandages. He'll need to stay here tonight so I can monitor him for fever, Hope informed the miners when she had finished, and no work for at least 2 weeks if he wants to keep that leg. The miners regarded her with newfound respect. You did good, miss, the older one said. Real good. Jake would have lost that leg for sure without your help. Word of Hope's competence spread quickly through Unionville. By the time Dr. Wilson returned that evening, the story had grown to near mythic proportions. The Boston lady who had saved a miner's leg with the skill of a battlefield surgeon. You've earned their respect, Dr. Wilson told her with a proud smile as they checked on their sleeping patient. No small feat in a town like this. The following morning, Hope was sweeping the front step of the doctor's office when a familiar black gelding appeared, Knox Quinn astride. He dismounted in one fluid motion, tying Merlin to the hitching post before approaching. Miss Morrison, he greeted, removing his hat. Heard about your doctoring yesterday. Impressive. Hope felt a flush of pleasure at his approval. Hardly doctoring, just applying what Dr. Wilson has taught me. Knox studied her face. The month in Nevada had changed her. Her skin had taken on a golden hue from the sun, and there was a confidence in her bearing that hadn't been there when he'd first found her at the trading post. Still, he said, not every city woman would have the nerve to take charge like that. You're adapting well to Unionville. Hope leaned her broom against the wall. I've had little choice. There's always choice, Miss Morrison. You could have given up, sought charity, played the helpless victim. A smile warmed his eyes. Instead, you're building a life here. It suits you. His frank assessment sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Was there something you needed, Mr. Quinn, or did you ride into town simply to comment on my adaptation? Knox's smile widened at her spirited response. Actually, I came to extend an invitation. The Quarter Circle K is having its spring roundup feast next Saturday. It's tradition for all the ranch hands and some townsfolk to gather for a day of celebration after the hard work of roundup. There'll be a barbecue, music, dancing. He paused. I thought you might enjoy seeing a different side of Nevada life. Hope hesitated. Such an invitation suggested a level of personal interest she wasn't sure she was ready to encourage. Yet the prospect of experiencing a genuine Western celebration intrigued her. Would others from town be attending? Dr. Wilson, perhaps, Knox nodded. Doc comes every year. Sheriff Mills and his wife, the Hendersons from the Mercantile. It's a community gathering. His blue eyes held a hint of amusement. If you're concerned about propriety, Miss Morrison, I assure you, your reputation will remain intact. Hope felt a blush rise to her cheeks at his perception. I would be delighted to attend, Mr. Quinn. Thank you for the invitation. I'll come for you at noon on Saturday, then. He replaced his hat, tipping it slightly. Until then, Miss Morrison. As he rode away, Hope realized she was looking forward to Saturday with an eagerness that had nothing to do with community celebration and everything to do with spending time in the company of Knox Quinn. The week passed with agonizing slowness. Hope found herself counting the days to Saturday, even as she chided herself for such schoolgirl behavior. At 22, she was too old for such fanciful thoughts, especially after Edward's betrayal had shown her the danger of giving her heart too easily. Yet Knox Quinn was nothing like Edward Whitney. Where Edward had been polished, urbane, and ultimately false, Knox was straightforward, unpretentious, and genuine. In their limited interactions, he had treated her with a respect that acknowledged her as an equal, not as a possession to be acquired. Saturday dawned clear and warm. Hope spent more time than usual preparing, selecting her best dress, a pale green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes, and arranging her hair in a more flattering style than her usual practical bun. Doctor. Wilson noticed her care with a knowing smile but made no comment beyond. The quarter circle K puts on a fine spread. You'll enjoy yourself, Miss Morrison. Knox arrived precisely at noon, driving a wagon rather than riding Merlin. He had exchanged his usual working clothes for a clean shirt and vest, his dark hair slicked back with water. Hope's breath caught at the sight of him without the shadow of his hat. His features were even more striking. Miss Morrison, he greeted, helping her into the wagon with a gentle hand that sent warmth through her gloved fingers. You look lovely. Thank you, Mr. Quinn. Hope settled on the bench beside him, acutely aware of his proximity. I'm looking forward to seeing your ranch. As they left Unionville behind, Hope marveled at the landscape, vast expanses of sagebrush-dotted plains giving way to distant mountains. The emptiness might have seemed desolate once, but now she found beauty in its wild expansiveness. It's different from Boston, Knox observed, following her gaze. Very, Hope agreed, but beautiful in its own way. There's a freedom here that doesn't exist back east. Knox glanced at her with interest. Many find this country too harsh, too unforgiving, perhaps. But there's honesty in that harshness. Hope's thoughts drifted to the life she'd left behind. In Boston, everything is carefully cultivated: the gardens, the society, the people. Here, things simply are what they are, including the people. Hope met his gaze. Especially the people. The quarter circle K came into view as they crested a small rise, a sprawling ranch house surrounded by corrals, barns, and bunkhouses. Men were already gathered, some tending to cooking pits where beef slowly roasted, others setting up tables under a grove of cottonwood trees. In a cleared area, several cowboys were constructing a makeshift dance floor from wooden planks. It's larger than I expected, Hope said, taking in the scene. Started with just 40 acres and 20 head of cattle when my father claimed it, Knox explained, pride evident in his voice. Now runs close to 10,000 acres and 2,000 head. He guided the wagon toward the ranch house. My father passed 5 years ago, left it to me and my brother Kieran. He handles the business side from Sacramento. I manage operations here. This was the most personal information Knox had shared, and Hope found herself hungry to know more about him. You were born here, Knox nodded, helping her down from the wagon. Born in that house 30 years ago, never lived anywhere else and never wanted to. The celebration was already underway as Knox led Hope through the gathering. He introduced her to ranch hands, neighboring ranchers, and their families, making sure she was welcomed into every conversation. Hope was touched by how naturally he included her, his hand at the small of her back a reassuring presence as they navigated the crowd. Martha Fletcher arrived with her famous apple pies, giving Hope a warm embrace. Good to see you out enjoying yourself, child, and with my nephew no less. Her knowing smile made Hope blush. As afternoon turned to evening, lanterns were lit around the dance floor, and a small band of ranch hands with fiddles, a guitar, and a harmonica began to play. Knox, who had never strayed far from Hope's side throughout the day, now extended his hand. Would you care to dance, Miss Morrison? Hope hesitated. I should warn you, my dancing experience is limited to formal Boston ballrooms I'm not familiar with. She gestured toward the floor where couples were already engaging in lively movements. Knox's smile was warm. I'll teach you. It's not so different, just more honest, like everything else out here. The musicians began a waltz, and Hope found herself in Knox's arms, his hand steady at her waist as he guided her around the floor. He moved with surprising grace for a man who spent his days on horseback, and Hope soon relaxed into the rhythm of the dance. You're a natural, Knox murmured, his breath warm against her ear. I have an excellent partner, Hope replied, looking up to find his blue eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart beat faster. As the music ended, Knox didn't immediately release her. For a moment they stood still amid the swirl of other dancers, something unspoken passing between them. Then the spell was broken by a shout from nearby. Boss, got company coming. Knox reluctantly turned his attention to a young ranch hand pointing toward the road, where a cloud of dust announced approaching riders. His expression hardened as the riders came into view 5 men, led by a figure Hope recognized with a shock that felt like ice water in her veins. "Edward Whitney, Hope," Edward called out, dismounting and striding toward them. "Thank God I've found you." Knox's hand tightened protectively around Hope's waist. "You know this man," Hope could barely find her voice. "My former fiancé." "The one who left you stranded," Knox finished, his tone dangerously quiet. He stepped forward, positioning himself between Hope and Edward. "Mr. Whitney, I presume?" Edward Whitney looked out of place in his expensive Eastern clothes, now travel-stained and dusty. He frowned at Knox's protective stance. "And who might you be, Knox Quinn? This is my ranch you've ridden onto uninvited." Edward dismissed him with a glance. "I've come for Hope. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." Hope found her courage, stepping around Knox. "The only misunderstanding was my belief that you were an honorable man." Edward's expression hardened. "Don't be difficult, Hope. I've spent considerable time and money tracking you down. Your parents are worried sick." "My parents?" Hope's heart clenched. "What have you told them?" "That we had a lover's quarrel and you ran off in a fit of temper," Edward said smoothly. "I've convinced them I can make things right. We'll continue to Sacramento as planned. The wedding, there will be no wedding," Hope interrupted, her voice stronger than she felt. "You abandoned me without money or means to return home. You showed your true character, Edward, and I want nothing more to do with you." A murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Edward's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Don't be absurd, you can't possibly prefer this." He gestured dismissively at the ranch and the people around them. "To the life I'm offering." Knox stepped forward again, his stance relaxed, but somehow all the more threatening for its casualness. "The lady has made her choice clear. I suggest you respect it." Edward's hand moved toward his coat, and several ranch hands tensed, but he merely pulled out a handkerchief to dab at his perspiring forehead. "Hope, be reasonable. What would your parents say if they knew you were working as a nurse in some backwater settlement, associating with?" His gaze raked over Knox. "Cowboys." Hope lifted her chin. "They would say I've found honest work and honest people, more than I can say for what I found with you." She moved to stand beside Knox. "Please leave, Edward, there's nothing for you here." For a moment, it seemed Edward might argue further. Then his gaze shifted to the ranch hands who had moved closer, their posture making it clear that Whitney and his hired men were outnumbered. With a final glare, he turned back to his horse. "You'll regret this decision, Hope. When the novelty of playing pioneer wears off, you'll wish you'd come to your senses." No one spoke as Edward and his men mounted and rode away. When they had disappeared from view, the ranch hands returned to their festivities, though now their conversations buzzed with this new development. Hope stood rooted to the spot, trembling slightly from the confrontation. Knox gently touched her elbow. "Are you all right?" she nodded, unable to meet his eyes. "I'm sorry to have brought drama to your celebration. You have nothing to apologize for." Knox's voice was firm. "That man showed his true colors when he abandoned you. Today only confirmed his character." Hope finally looked up at him. "My parents, they must be so worried. I should write to them immediately, explain everything." "I'll take you back to town if you wish," Knox offered, though his expression suggested he'd prefer her to stay. Hope considered for a moment. Edward had found her, the shock of seeing him had passed. There was no reason to let his appearance ruin the day. "No," she decided. "The letter can wait until tomorrow. I'd like to stay if that's all right." The smile that spread across Knox's face was answer enough. "More than all right." As the evening continued, Hope found herself relaxing once more, though her mind occasionally returned to Edward's appearance. What troubled her most was not his presence but her own reaction to it. Seeing him had stirred no longing, no regret, only anger at his presumption and relief that she had escaped a marriage to such a man. The moon was high overhead, and the celebration beginning to wind down when Knox found Hope seated alone near the dying embers of one of the cooking fires. He settled beside her, offering a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully against the night's growing chill. "Penny for your thoughts," he said after a comfortable silence. Hope cradled the warm cup in her hands. "I was thinking about how different my life is from what I expected it to be 2 months ago. Disappointed." There was a careful neutrality in his tone, surprisingly no. Hope turned to look at him, his features softened in the firelight. In Boston, my future was predetermined: marriage to a suitable man, a proper home, children raised to follow the same path. I never questioned it because I never knew there could be anything else. And now? Now I know I'm capable of more than I ever imagined. I can make my own way, make my own choices. She hesitated, then added softly, choose my own path. Knox's eyes never left her face. And what path might that be, Hope Morrison? It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the night air. I'm not entirely sure yet, she admitted, but I find I'm in no hurry to leave Unionville. Knox smiled, the warmth of it reaching his eyes. I'm glad to hear it. He hesitated, then added, because I find myself in no hurry for you to leave either. The significance of their exchange hung in the air between them, neither willing yet to put into words what was developing between them, but both acknowledging its existence. As Knox drove Hope back to town in the pre-dawn hours, a comfortable silence enveloped them. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when they reached the doctor's office, but neither made a move to end their time together. Finally, Knox spoke. I meant what I said earlier. I'm glad you're staying in Unionville. Hope met his gaze in the dim light, and I meant what I said about choosing my own path now. She gathered her courage. I hope that path might include getting to know you better, Mr. Quinn. Knox's smile was slow and genuine. I believe that can be arranged, Miss Morrison. He helped her down from the wagon, holding her hand perhaps a moment longer than necessary. Get some rest. I'll call on you properly next Sunday if that's agreeable. As Hope watched him drive away, she felt a sense of anticipation for the future that had nothing to do with returning to Boston or the life she had left behind. For the first time, she was truly forging her own destiny and discovering that the wild Nevada territory might hold everything she never knew she wanted. In the days following the Quarter Circle K celebration, Hope threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. Her confrontation with Edward had crystallized her determination to establish herself independently in Unionville. She wrote a long, honest letter to her parents explaining everything that had happened, from Edward's betrayal to her current situation. Posting it gave her a sense of relief. Whatever their response, she had been truthful. Dr. Wilson noticed the change in her. You seem more settled, he observed as they worked together treating a child's fever, more certain of your place here. Hope smiled, adjusting the cool compress on the little girl's forehead. I believe I am, Doctor. Unionville is beginning to feel like home. The doctor's eyes twinkled knowingly. And would a certain rancher have anything to do with that feeling? Heat rose to Hope's cheeks. Perhaps, she admitted. Though it's more than that, I've found I have skills and strength I never knew I possessed. For the first time, I'm living by my own choices, not others' expectations. Freedom suits you, Dr. Wilson said approvingly, as does Nevada. True to his word, Knox called on Hope the following Sunday. He arrived at the doctor's office precisely at noon, dressed in his Sunday best, hat in hand. Hope had prepared a picnic basket, and they rode Merlin to a peaceful spot by the Walker River where cottonwoods provided shade from the midday sun. As they spread a blanket on the grass, Hope marveled at how comfortable she felt in Knox's company. There was none of the artifice that had characterized her courtship, with Edward no careful monitoring of words or behavior to maintain a proper impression. With Knox, conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences that needed no filling. Tell me about your family, Knox said as they shared cold chicken and biscuits, beyond what you've mentioned before. Hope described her parents, her father, a successful merchant, her mother the daughter of an old Boston family, and her younger sister Emily, who was finishing her education at the same ladies' academy Hope had attended. They had such specific plans for me, Hope sighed. A suitable marriage, a proper home in a respectable neighborhood. I never questioned it until Edward showed you that suitable doesn't necessarily mean good, Knox suggested. Exactly. Hope studied Knox's face, the strong jaw, the laugh lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of a life lived outdoors. What about your family? You mentioned your brother in Sacramento. Knox nodded, stretching his long legs out before him. Kieran's 4 years younger. Better with figures and business than I ever was. We make a good team. He handles the accounts and cattle sales. I manage the land and herd. His expression softened. Our mother passed when Kieran was just 10. Our father raised us on his own after that. Taught us everything: riding, roping, ranching, and what it means to be honorable men. He sounds like a remarkable person. He was. Pride colored Knox's voice. Started with nothing but determination and built the quarter circle K acre by acre, head by head. Most importantly, he taught us to respect the land and everyone on it, from the lowest ranch hand to the highest official. Hope heard what Knox didn't explicitly say, that his father had instilled in him the values that had prompted him to help a stranded young woman with no expectation of reward. It made her admire him all the more. They spent the afternoon talking about their lives, their beliefs, their hopes for the future. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, Knox helped Hope back onto Merlin for the return journey. "I've enjoyed today," Hope said as they rode, her back warm against his chest where she sat before him in the saddle. "As have I." Knox's voice was close to her ear. "In fact, I find I enjoy any day that includes your company, Hope Morrison." The use of her given name sent the same thrill through her as it had at the ranch celebration. "I feel the same way, Knox," she replied, using his first name intentionally. She felt rather than saw his smile as his arm tightened briefly around her waist. That Sunday was the first of many. Throughout the summer, Knox called on Hope whenever his ranch duties allowed, which was most Sundays and occasional evenings. They rode along the river, attended church socials, and sometimes simply sat on the bench outside Dr. Wilson's office, talking until the stars emerged in the vast Nevada sky. Unionville accepted their courtship with the matter-of-factness of a community accustomed to life's unpredictability. Dr. Wilson served as a tacit chaperone, his presence ensuring Hope's reputation remained untarnished even as her heart became increasingly entwined with Knox's. In early August, a letter arrived from Boston. Hope's parents had finally responded to her explanation of events. With trembling hands, she opened it in the privacy of her room above the doctor's office. Her father's handwriting filled the pages with concern, relief, and finally, a grudging respect for her resourcefulness. They had been horrified to learn of Edward's behavior and had withdrawn all association with the Whitney family. Most importantly, they assured her of their love and support, whether she chose to return to Boston or remain in Nevada. The final paragraph brought tears to Hope's eyes. "While we cannot pretend to understand the appeal of such a wild place, we trust your judgment, Hope. You have always shown wisdom beyond your years. If you have found happiness and purpose in this Unionville, then we give you our blessing to follow your heart. Know that there will always be a place for you here should you wish to return." That evening, when Knox called, Hope shared the letter with him. They sat side by side on the steps behind the doctor's office, the summer twilight painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. "They sound like good people," Knox said after reading it. Hope nodded, wiping away a stray tear. "They are. I was so afraid they would demand I return home immediately." Knox was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "And if they had? Would you have gone?" The question carried weight beyond its simple words. Hope considered carefully before answering. 2 months ago, perhaps, but now." She turned to face him. "Now I know where I belong." Knox's expression softened as he reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "And where might that be, Hope Morrison?" Her heart pounded as she met his gaze. "Here in Unionville." She drew a breath, gathering her courage. "With you, if you'll have me." For a moment, Knox was utterly still. Then he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth spiraling through her entire body. "I've been waiting for you to realize that," he said softly. "From the moment I found you at Donaldson's trading post, something told me you were meant to be here." Hope smiled through the tears that threatened again. "When you said I didn't need money, I meant you had everything you needed already: courage, intelligence, strength." His blue eyes held hers. "I just had to wait for you to discover that for yourself." In the gathering dusk, Knox Quinn finally did what he had been restraining himself from doing for months. He leaned forward and kissed Hope Morrison. It was gentle at first, a question rather than a demand. When she responded, her hands moving to his shoulders, the kiss deepened into a promise that needed no words. When they finally parted, Knox rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Hope. Have almost from the beginning, though I tried to give you time and space to find your way." "I love you too," she whispered, the words coming easily, naturally. "And I've found my way now. It leads right here." The following Sunday, Knox arrived with a picnic basket of his own and a mysterious air about him. They rode to their favorite spot by the river, but instead of dismounting immediately, Knox guided Merlin a little further, to a small rise overlooking both the river and the valley beyond. "I want to show you something," he said as he helped Hope down from the saddle. From this vantage point, Hope could see the meandering river, the distant rooftops of Unionville, and the sprawling rangeland beyond. Knox stood behind her, his arm around her waist as they surveyed the panorama. "This land here," he said, gesturing to the area directly below them, "is part of the Quarter Circle K, 20 acres of the prettiest land on the ranch with water rights and good grazing." Hope leaned back against him, enjoying the solid warmth of his chest. "It's beautiful. I think so too." There was something in his voice, a tension and anticipation that made her turn to face him. "I've been thinking about building a house here." Hope's heart skipped a beat. "A house," Knox nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "For a family, my family." He took her hands in his. "For our family, Hope, if you'll marry me." Though she had sensed their relationship was heading toward this moment, the actual proposal still took her breath away. Joy surged through her as she looked from Knox's hopeful expression to the beautiful land he was offering to share with her. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing with certainty. "Yes, I will marry you, Knox Quinn." His smile was radiant as he pulled a small velvet pouch from his pocket. "I have something that belonged to my mother. I'd be honored if you would wear it." Inside the pouch was a simple gold band with a small, perfect diamond. As Knox slipped it onto her finger, Hope was struck by how right it felt, not ostentatious like the large emerald Edward had given her, but genuine and lasting, like the man who now placed it on her hand. "It's perfect," she whispered, raising her face for his kiss. They spent the afternoon planning their future together, sitting on the knoll where their home would stand. Knox described the house he envisioned spacious but practical, with a wide porch where they could watch the sunset and plenty of room for children to grow. "When would you like to be married?" he asked as they finally packed up their picnic to return to town. Hope considered. "Not a long engagement. I've learned life is too uncertain to postpone happiness." "Fall then, before the winter sets in," Knox suggested. "That would give us time to begin building the house, though it likely wouldn't be finished until spring." "Fall would be perfect," Hope agreed. "And I don't mind if the house isn't ready immediately. Martha might let us stay at the boarding house until it's complete." Knox grinned. "Actually, there's a small cabin near the main house at the ranch. It was the original homestead my father built. It's simple but sound. We could make it comfortable enough for the winter, then move to our new home in the spring." The thought of creating a home with Knox, even a temporary one, filled Hope with anticipation. "That sounds wonderful." As they rode back to Unionville, plans taking shape between them, Hope marveled at how completely her life had transformed in the span of just 4 months. She had arrived desperate and alone. Now she was embracing a future filled with love and possibility. The Nevada territory that had once seemed so foreign was becoming the home of her heart. News of their engagement spread quickly through Unionville. Dr. Wilson was among the first to offer congratulations, though his joy was tinged with regret at the prospect of losing his capable assistant. "I'll still help whenever I can," Hope assured him. "The Quarter Circle K isn't so far that I couldn't ride in when you need an extra pair of hands." The doctor patted her shoulder affectionately. "You've learned more in 4 months than most would in a year. You'll make a fine rancher's wife, but don't forget your healing skills. They'll serve you well out there." Martha Fletcher was overjoyed at the news, enveloping both Hope and Knox in expansive hugs when they told her. "I knew it from the moment he brought you to my door," she declared. "Never seen my nephew look at any woman the way he looked at you." Preparations for the wedding proceeded with the practical efficiency that characterized life in Unionville. Hope wrote to her parents with the news, including a careful sketch of the land where their home would be built. Though she knew they couldn't travel such a distance for the ceremony, she wanted them to envision her happiness. Knox, meanwhile, began preparations for their future home. He consulted with Hope on every detail, from the placement of windows to capture the best views to the layout of rooms to accommodate the family they hoped to have. Ground was broken in late August, and the foundation laid before September's end. Their wedding was set for October 15, 1876, a Sunday when the fall colors would be at their peak, and before the unpredictable Nevada weather turned toward winter. The ceremony would be held in Unionville's small church, with a celebration to follow at the Quarter Circle K. As the date approached, Hope found herself reflecting on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to this point. Had Edward not revealed his true nature by abandoning her, she would never have discovered her own strength or found her way to Knox. What had seemed a disaster had become the greatest blessing of her life. 2 days before the wedding, Hope received a final surprise. A stagecoach arrived carrying not only a letter from her parents, but also a trunk containing her mother's wedding dress, carefully packed for the journey west. The accompanying note brought tears to her eyes. "While we cannot be with you on your wedding day, we send this dress with all our love. Your happiness is clear in every letter, and we look forward to the day when we might visit you in your new home and meet the man who has won your heart. Until then, know that our blessings go with you as you begin this new chapter of your life." The morning of October 15 dawned clear and crisp, the eastern mountains outlined in gold as the sun rose. Hope stood in Martha's guest room, where she had spent the night according to tradition, while Martha helped her into her mother's wedding dress, ivory silk with delicate lace trim, altered slightly to fit Hope's taller frame. "You look beautiful, child," Martha said, securing the last button. "Like you were born to be a bride on this very day." Hope studied her reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the frightened girl who had arrived in Unionville 5 months earlier. This woman's eyes held confidence and joy. Her posture spoke of strength discovered through adversity. "I never imagined this would be my life," Hope said softly, "but now I can't imagine any other." The church was filled to capacity when Hope arrived. It seemed the entire population of Unionville had turned out, along with the hands from the Quarter Circle K and neighboring ranches. Dr. Wilson waited to escort her down the aisle in her father's stead. "Ready, my dear?" he asked, offering his arm. Hope nodded, her eyes already finding Knox at the altar, handsome in a new black suit, his expression transforming from nervousness to wonder as he saw her. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. They exchanged traditional vows, their voices clear and certain in the hushed church. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Knox's kiss was tender yet passionate, a promise of the life they would build together. The celebration at the Quarter Circle K lasted well into the evening. There was feasting, dancing, and toasts to the new couple's happiness. As twilight descended, Knox led Hope away from the revelry toward the small cabin that would be their first home together. Hand in hand, they walked through the door into their future. The cabin had been transformed, fresh paint, new curtains, a quilt Martha had made for their marriage bed. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the simple furnishings. "Welcome home, Mrs. Quinn," Knox said softly, drawing her into his arms. Hope wound her arms around his neck, her heart full to bursting with love. "Home," she repeated. "I think I've been looking for this place my entire life without knowing it." "And I've been waiting for you without knowing it," Knox replied, his forehead resting against hers. "From the moment I saw you standing in that trading post, proud and afraid but refusing to break, I knew you were something special." As night fell over the Nevada landscape, Hope and Knox Quinn began their life together, a life built not on the carefully constructed expectations of Boston society, but on the honest foundation of love, respect, and shared dreams in the wild beauty of their chosen home. Spring came early to the Nevada territory in 1877. By March, The rangeland was already turning green, wildflowers dotting the meadows with splashes of color. Hope stood on the porch of their newly completed home, watching as Knox worked with the ranch hands in the corral below, breaking a spirited young stallion. Their first 5 months of marriage had been everything she could have hoped for and more. The winter in the small cabin had been cozy rather than cramped, filled with laughter and love as they adjusted to life together. Hope had continued to ride into Unionville once or twice a week to assist Dr. Wilson, maintaining her independence while embracing her new role as Knox's wife and partner in running the Quarter Circle K. Now, watching her husband's skilled handling of the nervous horse, Hope felt a flutter of movement beneath her hand where it rested on her still flat stomach. Their first child, due in late summer, was making its presence known. She hadn't told Knox yet, wanting to be certain before sharing the news. That evening, as they sat on their new porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant oranges and reds, Hope decided the moment had come. "I was thinking," she said casually, "that the second bedroom might need furniture sooner than we expected." Knox turned to her, his brow furrowed in confusion. "We've guests coming I don't know about," Hope smiled, taking his hand and placing it gently over her abdomen. "Not guests. But perhaps a new resident around August." Understanding dawned in Knox's eyes, followed by a joy so profound it took Hope's breath away. "A baby, you're certain?" Hope nodded, her own happiness reflected in his expression. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. We're going to have a child, Knox." With a whoop that startled the horses in the nearby corral, Knox lifted Hope from her chair and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure delight. When he finally set her down, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "A family," he said softly, his hand returning to rest protectively over their growing child. "Our family." That August, their son Kieran Thomas Quinn was born, named for Knox's brother and Hope's father. He arrived with a lusty cry that announced his presence to the world, dark-haired like his father but with Hope's green eyes. Dr. Wilson attended the birth, pronouncing both mother and child perfectly healthy. Life settled into a new rhythm with the baby's arrival. Knox proved to be as natural a father as he was a rancher, often carrying Kieran in a sling as he went about his daily tasks, pointing out cattle and horses to the infant as though he could understand every word. Hope divided her time between caring for their son, managing their household, and continuing her occasional work with Dr. Wilson, whose medical knowledge she still eagerly absorbed. In the fall of 1877, Hope received unexpected visitors. A stagecoach arrived from Unionville bearing her parents, Thomas and Eleanor Morrison, who had finally made the arduous journey west to meet their grandson and see their daughter's new life. The initial meeting was tearful and joyous. Eleanor couldn't stop marveling at little Kieran, while Thomas and Knox found common ground in discussions of business and ranching. Over the course of their 2-week stay, Hope watched with satisfaction as her two worlds east and west gradually merged into understanding and respect. On their final evening together, as they sat around the dining table Knox had crafted himself, Thomas raised his glass in a toast. "When we received word that Hope had been abandoned in Nevada territory, it was our darkest hour," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We imagined every terrible fate that might befall our daughter so far from home and help." Hope reached for Knox's hand under the table, finding it already extending toward hers. "But now," Thomas continued, "seeing this home you've built together, the life you've created, and our beautiful grandson, I must acknowledge that what seemed a tragedy was in fact the greatest blessing." He raised his glass higher. "To Hope and Knox Quinn, who found each other against all odds, and to the family they have begun." As glasses clinked around the table, Hope caught Knox's eye and saw in it the same thought that filled her heart: how strange and wonderful that her abandonment at a trading post had led to this moment of perfect happiness. Later that night, after her parents had retired to the guest room and Kieran slept peacefully in his cradle, Hope and Knox stood on their porch beneath a canopy of stars. "Do you ever think about it?" Hope asked, leaning into her husband's embrace. "How different our lives would be if Edward hadn't left me behind that day." Knox's arms tightened around her. "I try not to dwell on what might have been," he admitted, "but I do thank my lucky stars every day that I happened to be at Donaldson's trading post at that exact moment." Hope turned in his arms to face him. "When you told me I didn't need any money, I meant it," Knox said simply. "You had everything you needed inside you: courage, intelligence, determination. All I did was give you a chance to discover that for yourself." "You gave me much more than that," Hope whispered, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. "You gave me a home, a family, a love I never knew existed." Under the vast Nevada sky, their lips met in a kiss that still held all the passion of their first, yet was deepened by the months of shared joys, challenges, and dreams fulfilled. Their story, which had begun with abandonment and uncertainty, had transformed into one of the greatest love stories Unionville had ever known. Proof that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations. In the years that followed, the Quinn family flourished along with the Quarter Circle K Ranch. Hope and Knox welcomed a daughter, Martha Aliner, in 1879, and another son, James Wilson, in 1882, named for the doctor who had become like family to them both. Dr. Wilson himself attended all three births and considered the Quinn children almost his grandchildren, having no family of his own. Hope continued her work with Dr. Wilson on a limited basis, eventually taking on an apprentice of her own, a young woman named Sarah, who showed the same aptitude for healing that Hope had discovered in herself. Together, they ensured that Unionville and the surrounding ranches had access to medical care even as the town grew with Nevada's development. Knox expanded the Quarter Circle K-Tkes operations with his brother Kieran's business acumen, supporting him from Sacramento. By 1885, it was one of the most successful ranches in the territory, known for its quality cattle and fair treatment of hands. Knox's reputation for honesty and hard work spread throughout Nevada, leading to offers of political positions which he consistently declined, preferring the life he had built with Hope to any public recognition. The small cabin where they had begun their married life became a schoolhouse for the ranch children, including their own, with Hope often serving as teacher during the winter months when travel to Unionville's school was difficult. Her education at Miss Pinkerton's academy finally found practical use as she passed her knowledge on to the next generation. In 1888, Hope's parents relocated permanently to Unionville, Thomas Morrison having sold his Boston business interests to invest in Nevada's growing opportunities. They built a comfortable home in town, close enough for regular visits, but far enough to allow both families their independence. Aliner Morrison became a fixture in Unionville society, bringing Eastern refinement to the frontier town while embracing its straightforward values. Every year on October 15, their wedding anniversary, Hope and Knox would ride to the knoll where he had proposed, bringing a picnic and, as the years passed, their children. It became a family tradition to watch the sunset from that spot, remembering the beginning of their journey together and celebrating all that had come from that moment. And occasionally, when passing Donaldson's trading post during trips into town, Hope would pause, remembering the desperate young woman who had stood there that fateful day in 1876, thinking her life was over when in fact it was just beginning. "Do you ever regret it?" Knox asked her once as they drove past the trading post, their youngest son asleep between them on the wagon seat, staying in Unionville instead of returning to Boston's comforts. Hope's answer came without hesitation, as certain in 1890 as it would have been 14 years earlier. Not for a single moment. For in being abandoned at that trading post with no money, Hope had discovered the truth in Knox's first words to her: she didn't need any. What she had found instead was infinitely more valuable: her own strength, a love beyond anything she could have imagined, and a home where she truly belonged. And that, as Hope Quinn well knew, was worth more than all the riches of Boston or the gold in Nevada's storied mountains. It was, quite simply, everything.